Yeah. Great. We'll hand over to Mr. Chairman, Mr. Watson, I think item 1.1.
Good morning. I'm here on behalf of Graham today. He's presenting down at the Oswater Conference in Sydney, so let's have lots of fun down there. Just a quick summary. So we're here to talk about part of the water security item. This is particularly relating to the Mary River Basin plan produced by the state government. Obviously, the Mary River Basin is quite important, supplies almost all of our urban water supply, and basically Peter here will run through the plan and our commentary on it moving forward. So over to you, Peter.
Morning, everyone. So, yeah, as this is one piece of information we've been waiting for to feed into what we want to do for our water for Gympie, particularly moving forward. Take the plan as read, but a consultation on the update of the Mary plan started in 21. We made a couple of submissions about what water we thought we wanted for the Gympie area to cater for growth and some particular projects moving ahead. So we made those submissions sort of 21 and late last year. So end of February, the new draft plan came out for consultation. The consultation period, well, when I wrote this, was ended 21st of April. There were a couple of issues that extended that about a week. So, yeah, just quickly, the plan, this is the area that the plan covers. Of particular interest to us is the Mary Valley Water Supply Scheme, starting from Burrumba, running past us all the way to Tyro, but also picked up in the area of Padanga, Annamore. The Gameri surface water storage is just within the basin area. It's just on that side of the ridge, whereas the groundwater is on the other side, and the coastal plants. So plan runs out next year, so the aim is that this draft plan will be in time. Just where it sits, so the legislation that it's under is the Water Act. The water plans across the state sit in as subordinate legislation. Under that, we have Water Management Protocol, which is the rules about how unallocated water can be released to people. And water entitlement notices is about the licences that are not allocations, so rules about how that works. So generally the new plan, the way the plan worked is that consider a whole lot more things compared to when the last plan was done in 2011. So looked at general economic, social, cultural and environmental outcomes for the basin. And it was just looking at things like climate change, cultural outcomes for Indigenous people, modernising the water licence process, environmental flows in the river, a lot more detail in the unallocated water resource than the previous plan. So, compared to the previous plan, the blue dots on the map are previously, these were the nodes in the river that had to meet particular environmental outcomes, so flow and quality. We've added a whole lot more in this time, which, like there's one on Annamore Creek, but it's upstream from where we are, so it's about flow coming down to us, for instance. This is just in terms of over the life of the plan moving forward. They've got a really complicated formula which was a bit hard to follow about water allocation security objectives. So a big philosophy under the plan is anything moving forward in the new life of the plan should not impact people's existing licences and allocations. So it's saying that any new works, any new allocations granted during the life of this plan have this performance ratio saying it can't impact existing allocation holders by more than 2% for high priority water base. So it's about the reliability of the allocations and that existing users like us don't lose what we have now. So kind of big change is, well, it's not a big change. There's more detail now about the unallocated water reserves. So that those reserves are, in theory, what the modelling shows that the basin has as yield for water. So they've done all the modelling, said there's X thousand megs available to be used, and they've put that to specific purposes and specific people this time compared to the existing plan. So that's split up into three different types this time. So there's from the bottom, a general reserve of, relatively speaking, not very much, 2,000 megalitres, which can be taken from pretty much anywhere within the basin. There's an indigenous reserve of just over 7,000 megs, which is there that for cultural or indigenous business, that's available that people can apply for. You can see that the basin is divided up into a whole lot of subcatchments, so those reserves might be tied to specific areas. So like for us, we're obviously can only be using the catchments above us, whereas some of the others might be tied down to lower down the river. So the table that the strategic reserves are what is held specifically for town water supply, agriculture, and any other business that is water-based. So it's about that, the social economic part of the work that was done under the plan. So in there, specifically for us, there is 4,000 megs of unallocated water sitting in that reserve, specifically reserved for Gympie. The other ones, the big number is Sunwater, so that's really from the barrage down, and it's for that agricultural industry area down at the bottom of the catchment by Maryborough. So I've said in the report that is there held for us, but for it to become a guaranteed allocation, so having that reliability means it needs infrastructure built to hold it. So the wording under the thing is that the resource operations licence holder, that's one I missed when I was back here, for the scheme, because we're in that Merrywater scheme, which is currently Water, there needs to be some infrastructure to hold that so that we can access it throughout the year. So, again, under the plan, the resource operations licences and the operational manuals, which is currently Water for the Barumba Dam scheme, is they hold that licence. The water that's not in the water supply scheme, which is everything else that we, for instance, has a licence, which is like the Animals, the Kandangas, well, everywhere that's not Gympie or Imbil. There are some changes in that water entitlement licence area. So the first thing is the water plan does allow for organisations like ourselves to have our licences. We can apply for changes to our licences to improve urban water supply reliability. So the provision is there that we can make those applications to change our water licences. And the water management protocol is just the set of rules about how that water planning framing sits under the plan. because the existing plan came in about 2011, there's been a whole lot of changes in the way water's viewed around the state since then. So they're doing what they're called modernising the water licences. And there used to be a varying number of the licence would have a purpose. And for instance, some of ours are called town water supplies, some are called urban. Agriculture might have a different description. They're now simplifying that a licence can be urban, which all ours will be, stock and domestic, which is kind of the riparian take for people who take more of the house stock. And everything else will be called any, which means that the person with the licence can use it for whatever. Something that was in the news, I heard on the radio, like a day before the consultation period was ending, was people saying that, well, one of the changes that doesn't affect us is that licences for a lot of the agricultural have been based on you have 100 hectare farm and your water licence is water for 100 hectares, which they're changing that to say, well, it should be 100 hectares by X megs per hectare. Your water licence will now be, you've got 200 megs a year or whatever number, and you will need to meter it to measure what that is.
So for the farmers that have operated under an approved system that allowed them to access more water than what they're being possibly allocated in the future, is there any compensation for the loss of income associated with that?
No, so the two steps in what came out in the news, but it was pretty much said in the briefings that were given to the irrigators as well, that yes, as an initial consultation, well, the initial thing was it'll be X hectares per, or X megs per hectare, this will be your licence entitlement. People had the opportunity to make a submission saying, well, really, I use this much water now. And you were able to make that submission saying, well, I would like my entitlement to be Y rather than X. And you know, the state has been saying the aim of this plan is not to be taking away water that people already have, but want it to be measured so that everybody is just getting their entitlement. And the advantage under this scheme of doing that, so if somebody has 100 meg entitlement and their neighbour has 100, and if they're not going to use their whole entitlement this year, there's the opportunity to trade or assign to your neighbour saying, well, you can have 20 meg at one this year, as long as it's within that zone. That's why it's broken up into catchments. So the philosophy behind the change was not to be taking away what people already have, to measure it, and that's what it is going forward. So the draft entitlement notice, really, that was listing through it, amongst other things, all the licences that were going to have their purpose changed. So in that was our ones in the various zones, so Kandanga, Amamore, Wide Bay at Buchanan, and Seamar Creek, and Kimbombe, St Gameri. I only covered, we put in a submission, I only covered a couple of things, one of which is just asking the question that should our Rainbow Beach licence have been in this list, because it currently says town water supply in it. We assume it's going to be changing to urban, so I just said we believe that probably should have been in the list, so we'll just wait for that feedback. But it's not Bill lose the licence, it's just saying why wasn't it in the list. Again, the draft water management protocol is really just having the rules about what the unallocated reserve is, who it's generally for, and what are the rules for granting it. And as I said, something new with actually having licences with volumes on them is it will now allow that seasonal water assignment rules, so how water can be traded with people and and rules that have changed a little bit then is now all that needs to be recorded. It was starting to come in with the allocations under Seqwater, but just to that it was make public as part of that transparency that we're under is if people are trading water, it just needs to be on the register of what's been traded and what price it's been traded for. And price can be zero if it's just, it doesn't have to be a dollar value, but it just has to be recorded. So there were a whole lot of reports in the background, but that was it. The draft plan is the consultation period's closed, so we'll just be waiting for the department to work through if there are any changes to that, and it will be coming into play next year.
You said something about storage or okay, so we've got an extra 4,000 megs.
Held for us, reserved for us.
We also have to be able to store it or something like that, or
yes.
Can you expand on that?
So it's saying that the scheme licence holder, which currently is Seqwater, to convert that 4,000 reserve to an allocation, which doesn't need to happen all at once, there needs to be infrastructure to hold it, which, in what we've been thinking up till now, that means a Barumba raising, for instance, so that there is additional infrastructure to hold that water. It doesn't have to be a Barumba, it might be something else, and that's what we'll be looking at a bit more in that work we're doing on the security between now and when we report back towards the end of the year, is flesh out what that means once we start the discussion with Seqwater. In future, if the business case for the pumped hydro goes up, there would be discussion with that as to whether that dam raising holds the little bit extra that's needed for us compared to the much bigger volume that's needed for the pumped hydro.
Anyway, questions, councillors? Councillor Fredden.
This is good news, Mr Mayor. Really good news. Hopefully it puts an end to our investigations that were mooted last term about getting water out of Kalula and pumping it to Gympie. I'd like to think we never hear of that again. We always said, and I could quote the Mayor here, there's plenty of water in the Mary system for council, which is a relatively small user. So it's good news there. A lot depends on how much we're going to have to pay for our new allocation. Let's just say they won't miss us. Gympie's been relatively fortunate in the water supply scheme that was set up, I think, in the 50s or 60s, was pretty economical. And I suppose as we go into the future, we're going to be seeing costs which may change the landscape somewhat. We have been fortunate. One thing I did notice in the report, I think you mentioned it as well now, we're going to have to start, or someone's going to start monitoring Tiwa Creek. I hope,
Probably.
yes, that's the way I read it. To me, that's the trigger for us to start looking at an alternative water supply for Tinkan Bay Kalula Cove. About 10 years ago, we'd started to investigate a solution to that problem, and now I see they're monitoring Tiwara Creek, having seen that that's in writing now. It's about time, Mr Mayor, that we started looking at the sustainability of the Tiwara Creek supply. There are alternatives out there, and it'd be good to see us just starting to do some work, because we may well get caught down the track if we're starting to monitor flows in Tiwara Creek.
And in a couple of those background reports, it's saying, you know, that what they're going to allow as reserve from Kalula sand mass is a relatively small number. But it does point out that our Tiwara Creek current entitlement, which is the volume is, well, it is, we're only using something like a third of it at the moment. It does point out that that is essentially part of the Kalula sand mass area.
Yep.
So I think that if the rules under the thing saying we have that opportunity to change our licences for water security, I think we do have that room under the changes to do what you're talking about, Councillor.
Right, one more. Amamore and Kandanga, it's one thing, as you mentioned, getting more allocation, but we've got to consider reliability. And may I suggest that without infrastructure on either of those creeks, we're not out of the woods. In terms of Amamore or Kandanga, council's long had a policy of no more expansion of Amamore Kandanga urban areas for good reason, and this doesn't solve any of those problems unless we get increased storage for those two. We are stuck with being able to supply a certain amount of water which doesn't favour development of those towns, and so be it. It's the way it's been for quite a while. But this doesn't help that, but it certainly helps Gympie.
I think we still have that opportunity for probably both those, but Amamore, for instance, without a weir at the moment, because that's not in the scheme that forms part of one of the licences, it's not an allocation. So it does, we still have that opportunity that a weir can be built under the scheme, which then would improve the reliability of the licence.
Councillor Smith.
We currently record water taken out of Kimbomba Creek, do we or not?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, most of those licences at the moment have an entitlement and a rate we can take. Some of those are in litres per second, and they're standardising everything as a megs per day take. From Kimbomba at Gameri, I think we measured a little bit more. Yeah, yes, there is a measure into the dams and a measure out.
So does that really restrict us when Kimbomba is blowing well and we should be pumping more than to try and fill the dams? Or?
I think when it's flowing well, we take as much as we can take under that, which is up to 2.7 megs a day. It's more when it's not flowing that becomes more of an issue for us.
Yeah. Are those dams still holding water okay?
Yes, I believe so. We have done the swap between them a couple of times over the last couple of months when we've been doing the dosing to the dams.
Any questions, councillors? Just further on the discussion around farmers and their allocation. You know, up until the early 2000s, the Mary River was just, wall-to-wall dairy farmers, unrestricted licences to pump and clean out the dairies. The rivers, with deregulation and the disaster that brought for the dairy industry, the river's got a hell of a lot more water in it than it's ever had, as Councillor Fredman noted before, if people, the dairy farmers that have managed to survive through that government-led destruction, and they do put a submission in, is that option of a submission just a way to make them feel good that they might get some extra allocation, or is there some genuine desire on behalf of the body administering this that they will understand that they will have significant impact to those, particularly those dairy farmers that are left?
As I understand it, the statement that was made was, we want, they're not trying to take water off people. So if there were any of those farmers who felt that the number that had been come up with was not what they had been using and what was, their past use for that purpose, they were able to make a submission to say, well, we think it should be this, and those would all be considered together. I believe that was done in good faith, because that's what they've been saying publicly.
So I guess I don't have the same sort of confidence. Any other questions, councillors? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Move on to item 1.2, the draft arts and cultural plan. Cheers, Andre. Welcome to start. We'll take the report as being read, councillors. And Mr. Burns and stuff.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and councillors. So, through you, Mr. Mayor, we'd just like to highlight the key aspects of the draft arts and cultural plan. We also note that we are presenting a revised public art policy today for councillors. So just to reiterate the purpose of the plan, so as councillors would be aware, the corporate plan, one of the key strategic pathways was for staff to finalise and implement an arts and cultural plan. So the purpose of the plan is to identify priorities for arts and culture for the next 5 years for the Gympie region. It's a plan not just for council, but also for the community, the creative sector, funding bodies and other levels of government. What it does is provides us as staff and the community with a mandate which allows us to direct resources, leverage possibilities and advocate for greater funding and opportunities for arts and culture in the region. I've actually just got this up on the screen before you, councillors. This is a really lovely snapshot of what arts and culture means. So we're adopting this to really encapsulate what our arts and culture plan means by arts and culture. So as you can see, it covers a broad range of things, including the performing arts, so live music, theatre, dance, opera, circus, etc. Audio, such as film, TV, radio, new media, so software, video games, digital content, creative services, design, publishing and print media, visual arts, cultural sites, and traditional and cultural expressions. So it's such a broad term, we think it's really important that we actually outline what we mean for arts and culture in our region.
I do have a question in regards to that, if that's okay.
Yes.
On the printing, you've got newspapers, magazines, and how does newspapers work in with?
Where it says film, television, radio, and other broadcasts.
Publishing and print media.
Over this way, books, print, yes. So in terms of that, that's in the broader cultural sense. So arts and culture is quite broad. So there's cultural content provided in newspapers, social media, a whole range of publishing.
So that's like just articles on culture and stuff within.
That's right. And this is not to say that council will be the ones delivering this, but when we're talking about arts and culture, it would encapsulate a really broad range of items.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, councillor. In terms of strategic alignment, we just wanted to highlight for the councillors that we've developed this arts and cultural plan in the context of our national and state positioning. So the Commonwealth has recently released its revised cultural policy. State government has its Creative Together policy, and indeed in Gympie region we have our corporate plan, which articulates a whole range of priorities around arts and culture and nurturing creativity. And we've intentionally developed this plan in that context so that both council and stakeholders in the community can go for funding to the federal and state government bodies and other bodies. In terms of the role of council, we are one player amongst many in terms of arts and culture in our region. So as outlined in the plan, we play a range of roles which are outlined in the plan which you received. They're up here on the screen. So that is of a connector, a leader, an advocate, a host, a partner, investor, capacity builder and custodian. But as I've said, it's very much a collaborative endeavour in achieving the outcomes and visions of the arts and culture plan. So artists, local businesses, creative practitioners, community groups, venues, creative industries, museums, residents, cultural institutions, other levels of government all have a role to play in achieving arts and culture in our region. So councillors, I'd like to dwell upon our cultural vision for a little while. So the cultural vision, and this is indeed a draft, is that the Gympie region is alive with creativity, arts and culture celebrating who we are and inspiring what the region can be. So we're very much trying to convey that our region is alive, it's an amazing place to be, and that creativity, arts and culture celebrates who we are as a region, our identity, our people, our places, our facilities, but it also inspires what the region can be. So it's both current and past, but also future focused. Are there any comments at all from councillors about that draft vision? Does it encapsulate what you would hope for our region in terms of?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I may, the portfolio councillors have already had input into this vision, and it has been amended since they provided their advice and provisional support.
Through the Mayor, page 13 of this particular document. I'm concerned with new Gympie Library, the word new in there. I think we're narrowing our, instead of saying that we can extend on the existing one and so forth, we definitely, I think, need more space, but I think that word is setting us up for the failure, council, the organisation, for failure at a future date.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so I'll just take note of that the word new, and you'd like us to amend that to that it could be a little bit more, it could be a revised, renewed, upgraded.
Upgraded. I definitely think there needs to be work done in that area with the council organisation, but I don't think putting the word new in there is going to be a good.
Expanded might be a good word, I don't know.
Sorry?
Expanded needs to be bigger. That's
Yes, yeah, we definitely need more space.
Do you have any more, Councillor Devlin?
Yeah, but I'm happy for Bob to speak up
Councillor
now.
President?
Just a quick one with that cultural vision. Celebrating who we are. We put a lot of emphasis through our Heritage Committee and other obligations to who we were. And I'm proud of who we were. And I would think that preserving, recognising, fostering knowledge about heritage is also part of our culture. And I would think that that's a little bit short on what I'd like to see us respecting for the region. The words are great as they are, who we are and what we can be, but the whole concept of our heritage and why we are like we are, I don't think is outside the realm of our cultural vision. There might be better words, but to encapsulate what I'm saying, celebrating who we were, who we are and who we can be is, I think, important. We're a very proud town, proud of our heritage. Not many towns can boast the heritage like we've got, and we preserve it well and we respect it. I'd like to think that's part of the culture that we try to grow.
perhaps celebrating where we have come from. Who we are.
That's
I don't know. I get
a good one, yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is obviously a draft. At the very end of the report, and we said we take the report as read, there is reference to the fact that of the next stages, which will be engagement with the community and consultation. All those consultation elements will be taken into account and fed back in, and changes made to the document before it comes back to councillors for final presentation. So the team and I are more than happy to take those two comments on board and incorporate them into that consultation feedback and see if we can revise that vision.
And I think there's probably no person in the room closer to heritage than Councillor Fredman. More ways than one.
Councillor Diego.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to pick up on, I might move forward from the vision now unless there's any other comments. So in terms of expanding on that, particularly Councillor Fredman, we have key outcomes that we're striving for through the Arts and Cultural Plan. And with that, well, I will jump ahead. So
Number 5.
Outcome number 5 is actually, Councillor Fredman, our living history and unique regional identity are honoured and shared. So that's very much that one key outcome that we're striving around is very much around the preservation, sharing and acknowledgement and honouring of our heritage, our history, and also acknowledge that that's a living history as well. But I might just pop back up to the other outcomes that we're striving for. The first being First Nations arts and culture is recognised and celebrated. Our second one being our creative sector is valued and thriving. So that's very much our professional artists, our community artists sector is thriving. Our third is around our audience and our community being engaged and co-creators. Our fourth is around our places and spaces, are buzzing with creative activation, and our fifth one being our living history and unique identity is honoured and shared. So through you, Mr Mayor, those outcomes are very much a fleshing out, if you like, of what that vision would be, but very much taken on your point, Councillor, about whether the vision needs to encapsulate more of the heritage. Do the councillors have any comments on the outcomes that they'd like to?
Sorry, we still got more to come, haven't we?
We do.
Yeah, I'll wait for the other, sorry. Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
What I like about the strategic outcomes is they are dynamic. Sometimes they're just, strategic outcomes are just like goals sometime in the future where these things are a bit more dynamic, and I like that.
Thank you, Councillor. And just further to that point, we do very much recognise that these outcomes are interconnected, and if we're doing a project, they may be achieving 3 or 4 or 5 or 1 of those outcomes. So they're very much not done in silos or isolated, knowing that one project can tee off for many of those. Moving forward then in terms of the delivery of the plan. So the plan will be delivered through a series of action plans. So the Arts and Cultural Plan is a high-level document, if you like.
Sorry.
Yes.
You've skipped a few pages there. Can I go back to that?
Quite a few councillors, but I'll just.
Okay, sure.
If you, and then we're absolutely open to
Lovely,
questions
thank you.
on any page that councillors would like. So in terms of delivery of the plan, this is a very high-level strategy, if you like, and then there'll be detailed action plans about how we're going to deliver it each year, depending on the budget that we have in that time frame. So councillors, we've intentionally created, intending on having a short-term action plan, which is just for 2023-24. The budget, council's budget is very much in the final stages, so we know generally what we have in terms of arts and culture with our own budget, but that doesn't stop us from seeking funding from elsewhere. So during our consultation phase, as my director alluded to, we'll be seeking community feedback on what they wish to see delivered in the first year. We're also mindful that we're going into a council election in March next year, so we thought the next action plan would be from July, would be for the period 2024 sorry, that's actually a mistake. It should be July 2020. Sorry, those are mistakes. It should be July 2024 to 28, which would be the next significant period. My apologies, councillors. I'll make sure that that's correct. It is actually correct. Anyway, the next plan will be following the calendar. So big blooper on our part, my apologies. But the intention is very much that once the council elections are completed in March next year, that the new councillors would have input into the action plans moving forward and also the subsequent budgets. In terms of funding, it is outlined there that there'll be a range of funding sources leveraged to implement this plan. So there's obviously council's annual budget, but also funding from state and federal funding, one-off external grant funding, and corporate sponsorship and philanthropy. And finally, for our presentation, just in terms of consultation, our next steps, but pending councillors' feedback today, we'll take the draft plan out for community consultation between May and June. The engagement methods will include targeted focus groups and meetings, information sessions, and an online survey. And then, as my director referred to, following that public consultation, we'll amend the plan and bring it back to yourselves in July, August for workshop and an ordinary meeting, hopefully adoption at that time. Very much.
Councillor Deborah?
Why, yes.
Should do one.
No. Just in terms of the studio trials, which you've mentioned on page 11, I know there was a feedback, you had consultation with people that were in it. Is there some sort of summation of what the issues were that were brought up and how we're addressing them?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I understand there was a summary done, and please don't quote me on this, but my understanding was that we did include that in one of our quarterly directorate updates.
Yep.
We very much summarised that, and that has informed our delivery for this year. We will. I'm not sure how much detail you'd like me to go into, councillors. It is up on Council's website at the moment. We have changed the programming for this year. It'll be run over 4 weekends,
yep,
and in particular sub-regions on particular weekends. And a range of other factors.
Other factors as well? Lovely, thank you. My other question is, when it comes to the draft policy, now I may have missed it, is there somewhere where it says to support local artists?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for raising this, Councillor Deborah. So the other part of our report was to present the draft public art policy. If councillors would like me to, I can now refer to that.
Well, actually, I do have another question, if that's okay.
The Arts and Cultural Plan.
Yeah, about the plan itself. So I'll go back to there now that I know. The short-term action plan, that has started, did you say? The work on that, because it's got to be ready by 1st of July.
Correct. So part of our consultation during May and June will be to further meet with the sector to understand what they would like to see in the coming year. We certainly do have actions and priorities already identified because we've had to develop our budget beforehand. We are also actively seeking funding from external funding bodies. For instance, with LT approval, we have sought approximately $80,000 through the Live Music Industry Fund, which was released recently, hopefully with a view of bringing income into our region to run a whole series of live and local across the region in the coming year. So if we get that money, we will certainly be delivering that in the coming year.
That's wonderful. I have concerns that when it comes to things like plans and stuff like that, if we get them after the start date, we're missing out on having the plan there for the beginning of that term and knowing how long it can take to do go through all the processes that actually bring it even just to us to say, the recommendation. I just think that time frame, we may not hit that.
Thank you, Councillor.
Probably won't hit that.
I will raise that through my director and CEO in terms of whether those action plans need to go through ELT or council laws. It's very much, I guess, the way that officers saw it, where they were very much, for the 1 year plan, are very much an operational plan in terms of what we will be delivering. So as you mentioned, they do take a while to work up some of those plans. So some of the actions, such as the projects that have already been funded through RADF, will be delivered in 23-24. So they've come to council, they've been approved, and they will be delivered in that coming financial year. So it'll be, I guess, a combination of things that we are already funded and we know are going to happen, but if we pick up some new actions through our consultation in May and June that are either funded by other agencies, they too can be incorporated in the action plan for 20.
So those are talking about operational plans?
I would consider them to be quite operational.
Both of them?
The second one, my understanding of the purpose of strategies and plans that we bring to council, the Arts and Cultural Plan is very much the strategic document that sets out the vision and the outcomes. And then our jobs as officers is very much to deliver against that through detailed action plans. So that's the intention of those short-term and medium-term action plans.
Can I talk a bit further about action plans, because before you go on to something else? I don't like the way you've worded it, and I don't think your timeframes are right. And with that, I think Councillor Devereux is raising a good point. I think we'd be better off just saying we will have action plans that are short and medium terms without the timeframes, and so because you're not going to have one for 23, 24 in this plan, because this plan's not going to come out till later on anyway. This whatever you call it. So I think forget the dates and just say you're going to develop a series of action plans that can roll through as your operational plans, which will, and the big expenses on it, obviously they'll come back to here for budget consideration anyway. That'd be my view, and so get rid of those dates. Just do action plans on a rolling basis or something like that. I don't know, but and be open with council about it in your quarterly report.
As the Mayor has left the room, through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, in essence, your points are really valid, both those points. We can amend the document as part of the consultation process, more than happy to do that, change those, take the dates out. However, as Ms Sark has referenced, we do have a number of RADF type projects that are already funded or already planned. They would go in an action plan. As part of the consultation, we would formulate and finalise a short-term action plan that would commence soon after, in inverted commas, the adoption of this plan. We talked very recently, actually, and we were far too far down the path that we really should have called this a strategy rather than an arts and cultural plan, because that's essentially what it is, being a strategic document. But those short-term action plans, we know some stuff. We can definitely put that in. Some stuff will come out of the consultation and will align with our current budgeted model. And so we can include that in the short-term plan as well. And then there are other things that may be come out of the consultation that we could put into year 2 of that short-term action plan. So we felt that having the times on it wasn't too much of an impost to us, and we definitely could produce an action plan that was viable. And again, that action plan would come back as part of the revised council, because this is a workshop, so it would come back for a council resolution at a council meeting, and that action plan would be there for councillors to finalise or not agree with if we got anything wrong. But however, taking your points on board, we can modify it so that the dates are amended and or taken out completely. And we can put a programme in place which will have both short-term and year 1 and year 2 items. And I hope that satisfies the councillors.
Thank you.
Councillor
Thank you. Looking at the spaces that we have for artists, is there anything in here about developing spaces?
Thank you, Councillor. So in terms of outcome 4, that relates to our places and spaces. Priority 4.1 outlines to continue to invest in cultural facilities, including, and it does iterate our existing facilities, the regional gallery, libraries, pavilion, civic centre, halls and museums. In terms of new ones, Councillor, in item 4.7, it says consider existing and future arts and cultural facilities.
Thank you. Excellent.
In the planning of town, etc., and capital works programs.
Thank you very much.
With outcome 1, can we add a 1.2, which is along the lines of supporting the development of a First Nations cultural centre or such like?
Through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, of course we can. I don't see any reason why not. I know that there have been discussions in the background about that particular opportunity. As councillors will be aware, and I believe it might be on today's briefings, there is a requirement for council to engage with the PBCs on those issues. So that would be very much part of the consultation process, but we can definitely include it for consultation. Does that satisfy you, Councillor?
Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, I'm having those discussions now anyway, so.
Sure, Bruce.
Yes, ma'am.
If there are no further questions, I might just quickly then turn to the draft public art policy. So we had several meetings last year with the councillors in regard to the public art policy, and on that basis we have revised the policy which was attached to this report. Really just handing over to the councillors now if you have any specific questions about the revised public art policy. We essentially have made the terminology more contemporary, ensured that new forms of public art such as multimedia, projection, sound and light art are now included in the public art policy. We've really emphasised that, that public art can be both led by council and the community and private sector, and we've obviously updated the policy to include reference to our new corporate plan and what will hopefully be our new arts and cultural plan. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Any questions, Councillor?
Just what I said before about, should we have in here something about supporting local artists and promoting, allowing them to be promoted? Because I'm not sure that it's specifically...
In terms of, through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, in terms of the guiding principles...
I was looking at the last, number 6, sorry.
You're looking at Gympie Council Region, Gympie Regional Council will, Councillor, is that what you were looking at?
Oh, well, that's what I'd like, yeah.
So,
Supporting opportunities for capacity building for local artists and local organisations.
may I have one moment? I know it's definitely in here because I...
Guiding principles, about 6 down, 6 or 7 down.
But it particularly says both community. Is it in the scope?
It's guiding principles.
Guiding principles. Is
Yeah,
that
6 or
community
7 dot points down.
6.
Support opportunities.
Support opportunities for capacity building for local artists and local organisations.
Lovely.
There are also, it is even further than that. It does talk about it being both community led.
Yeah.
And
Through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, in the placemaking definition, it talks about strengthening the connection between people and places, and the sense of community pride and the sense of place, which is also going towards that local artist strengthening.
Sorry, where's that?
Under placemaking,
Under
number
placemaking.
5, definitions
Number
5.
oh, I'm so sorry. I've just found it in principle 1.
Hey!
If you will, the principle number 1 is support the development of public art projects within the Gympie region that are council or community/private sector led, where it is established that such activity will give added value to public open spaces. So it's in principle number 1.
Wonderful.
Thank you, councillor.
Thank you.
I know I had it in there.
Anything else, Councillor?
No, that's all for me. Thank you very much.
I do like under purpose and scope, it includes functional art and creative design incorporated into functional infrastructure. So that means that our arts and cultural people will be talking to our engineering people at some stage.
Fancy patterns on bridges.
Or whatever. Well, it's not just that. I mean, I know there's a bit of controversy about the roundabout with the wooden things, which I really like. Other people don't like, that's fine. But that's including that in some of our more pedestrian, word design.
Thank you, councillor. And further to that, Deputy Mayor, we have included a new principle which says integrate public art into council thinking and processes to take advantage and development of opportunities as they arise, including working partnerships with commercial and major developments to identify opportunities in the planning stages. So very much looking to how we can integrate public art through all forms of public infrastructure.
And through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, what that means in some essence is when we're reviewing the open space network within some of the precinct planning that goes on as part of the new subdivisions, we'll look at opportunities and engage with the developers, see whether there are any factors they can bring to play in terms of providing public art in those spaces to make it an aesthetically pleasing environment for our community.
Sounds good. Any other questions? That's it. I take it.
Through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, then my understanding is then that we will refine and revise the draft plan and then we will then undertake the public consultation during May and June and bring it back to you in July, August. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Much time left
Okay, we'll move on.
today.
1.3. Government Remuneration Commission Council category review. Ms. Arch and Mr.
Morning, councillors.
Item 1.3 is regarding the Local Government Remuneration Commission Council's category review. I will take the report as being read. This is the start of preparations in providing any response you would like to the review. We do have the council remuneration policy, which we had reviewed previously, and a number of issues were raised in regard to the size of our area. The mayor potentially driving a lot further. Like, there are a lot of different things that we had discussed during that policy review. Any items that you would like to include in any review can be prepared and a report presented to the Commission. There's also the opportunity for further feedback at the LGAQ conference, which is usually in October. This is the start of having a think about what comments that you would like to prepare for Gympie Regional Council as part of this remuneration review. In the briefing note, there was a link to last year's annual report, which also includes some examples of what other councils have provided in previous years. That gives you some example of the different types of issues that they raise. Is there any feedback or discussion on it? Because what we can then do as part of the administrative arm is start researching, reviewing and preparing a submission.
Councillor Stewart.
So the review is particularly about what category councils put into.
Yes.
Right. So currently we're category 3, and whether we want to go up to category 4 or down to category 2, which I don't think we want to. From my point of view, I think category 3, looking at the different councils, is about right for us. Mm-hmm. And to go up to category 4 would mean we'd have a 20-something% increase in our income, and I don't think that our constituents would be too happy with that, but anyway.
Right.
There's no likelihood of us going up to Division 4 anyway, is there?
Well, this is part of the discussion. If you're content with where it sits at the moment, then that's fine too. It's just part of it. It really is highlighting any issues where you think that we may need to increase to a level 4 or to a level 2. It's purely up to you what input you'd like to put into this review, and it is about how much remuneration councillors receive.
So the guidelines at the moment is based on population, is it not?
Yes. Well,
That's correct.
yeah.
Through Mr Mayor, I would. My personal view is that we are probably in the correct category as we stand at the moment. The other councils that are in that category 3, and really all we're doing is we've been asked to consult on and present views and submissions on whether we should be in that category or whether there's a view that council should be in a higher or a lower category, and then to substantiate the reasons why that change would be supported.
Yes, Deborah.
Thank you very much. I don't think I want to have any say in anything to do with our incomes. There's a commission that does it all. The more involved we make ourselves, I think the worse it looks. So I'm always happy just to let them decide on what category and so forth. Are there any other considerations with the category which the ratepayer and residents, which it affects them, aside from how much we get? No. So I'm happy just to let them go ahead. Thank you.
And excuse me, there will be a lot of there will be communications that come out as they do this review. So as anything comes through, if there's issues that we want to comment on, then we can also comment on those.
I'm sorry. No, please.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor.
I'm not sure of the context, but there's no concern about our category at the moment, is there? That
No.
you are aware of? Okay.
This is just the letter just has been received from the department to inform us of this review that's going on and to invite us to prepare any representation that we may wish to do. And every council in Queensland would have received this letter.
And through Mr. Chair, this is just a standard process that's run by the department on a periodic basis.
So all councils are having a workshop and publicly discussing this. I do have another question, if I could, that's sort of related. When it comes to declaring our expenses, and we have just the one figure for vehicles, whereas I know that figure that's in there, I'd spend that myself in my council vehicle just on fuel quite easily. I just don't think we're being as upfront with that sort of stuff as we perhaps should be to show.
Yep, so through you, Mr. Chair. I think then that we go back to reviewing our remuneration policy, because that was the conversation that we had, so potentially we can raise that again and bring that back to a workshop.
It'd just be nice to let, I mean, the more open we can be about stuff, and that's a pretty basic one, the better we are. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, with our new enterprise solution, Technology One, we're just about to commence the rollout of our fleet modules, so that will enable us to do more accurate reporting on our fuel and vehicle management as well. So that will facilitate more accurate reporting through our corporate systems.
Thank you. Any further? Anyone? Councillor Hill?
Deputy Mayor, I did notice it's not really effective to our council, but some of the feedback is that to do with acting roles, especially with Deputy Mayor and Mayor, because it's not reflected and they were still on, the remuneration wasn't reflected there. While it's not in this term of this council, I just thought it was an interesting concept, because if it does happen, because there has been incidents where it has, and if they do have the powers to be able to reflect that in any review, I don't know, if it does happen or something does happen, then those roles really need to be reflected. If someone's sitting in that role doing that extra work, then it really should have a reflection. So it's just an interesting thing I noted in some of the other feedback from other councils. As something I thought was quite valid, and I'd like to support that in a concept.
Yeah.
We'll include that.
Yeah. Well, sorry, I think we need to include that in our remuneration policy when we review that, because it really is just about accurate records of and who's doing what roles.
But it's one of those, if I don't think acting is actually reflected.
You talk about it in the policy to allow that.
This is the guidelines we've got in front of us. With our remuneration policy, is there flexibility to change, or we've got to live with these category pay rates, or as in it says we get 70 grand, that's it, or is within the local Gympie remuneration policy you can modify how that gets paid more or less or whatever?
I'll take that on notice, but I'm pretty confident that that's category 3, and then depending on your, what we decide in the policy as far as allowances and things like that, that would be more flexible.
So there is flexibility within the local
space,
government
yes.
space, yeah.
Through Mr. Chair, that's my understanding as well. Council has to accept that remuneration level.
Yes. It's a maximum.
We can increase or decrease its allowances and other provisions. Also, when annual reviews come through, council can determine not to accept the percentage increases that are passed on when increases are given to the relative MLAs on which councillors receive a percentage. So that's a mechanism where council can defer pay increases, if you like.
Okay, thanks.
It's a 4% pay increase proposed from July 1. We get automatically unless we decide otherwise.
There is the list there that they consider, and CPI is one of them, with increases in wage price index. Like, there are a few set things that.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, thank you. Item 1.4 is councillor portfolio meetings. We'll take this report as being read too. This is an ongoing conversation that we've been having with council. The Audit and Risk Committee department LGAQ, there's a lot of advice that has come back saying that council should not have this policy, in that it provides room or minimal room to appropriately manage our conflicts of interests, and the discussions that we get into could be more operational. Now, the further our team moved down in really pushing this line of resistance towards this policy, it is considered that the issues that have been raised can be managed, because it's come back very clear from the workshops that we've already had that we don't want to impose any further, administrative costs and red tape or anything in the way we conduct our work, but it's about information sharing and how we appropriately apply this draft councillor portfolio policy. Would also include things that would control the discussions in there. For example, with the draft policy, the way it's worded, there is very clear responsibilities about councillors in the meetings and their portfolio management. There's clear responsibilities of what the directors and the employees' roles are. And then also in the administration, if we do up an agenda with dot points that might say no budget discussions, no operational conversations, like just reminders on what can and can't be discussed in there, that could be managed too. But we can do it together as a team, and it is about information sharing. So the draft policy that's been developed and was attached to the briefing note is now up for discussion, because I'd like to get your feedback on it, and in regard to the direction of where it's heading, get a firm direction moving to the next ordinary meeting, because this has been moving, back and forth for a little while now.
Personally, I can't see a problem with what we've got at the moment. Maybe I can be convinced on what the negatives are, but I just think the present system we've got works fine and doesn't really need change.
I think what you said in terms of, there are always issues wherever about operational discussions. And I'm sure a discussion I had with Liam before the meeting was a bit operational. But it just happens everywhere. It's a matter of managing that so yeah, it's a risk that we can manage, I think, as you said.
Yeah.
And I do have some things, some concerns I have in 5.1.8. Cannot direct employees, that's fine. Cannot inform any report recommendations, I'm not too sure what that means.
Probably more like say what they should be. So
Of
maybe
course.
we change the wording. Like, yeah.
So what page is
Can't direct, I think, is probably more appropriate, because sometimes staff will say, what do you think of these recommendations? And I'll say, well, from my point of view, I think that our constituents will have something,
Yeah, sure. Then that's
but that's different to, not direct, thank you. And the other one was, had 10 business days for an agenda, this is 7.1.3, and I think that's a long lead time. I don't think we need that much lead time. I think 5 maybe.
Yeah, actually, we had one of the administration staff said that as well. Like, it is a bit difficult having it 10 business days out.
So 5 is
Yeah.
just a week before.
Yeah.
Give us an idea, because it's not like high power, not trying to work through long reports or whatever. And the other one was, I can't find where it is location.
Oh yeah, at town hall. 7.1.6.
And whether town hall or departmental office or whatever, because mine are always at Shannon Street, which makes sense because that's where the director and most of the staff are.
Yeah, I agree with that point too. Like it's infrastructure at John
It
Street.
says
John Street, yeah.
it says unless advised otherwise, so that would.
Yeah. I just think emphasising it could be the departmental office rather than town hall, just emphasising it.
I think whatever it is should be consistent. Like, if we agree to that, we put departmental office, because people always end up here.
Yeah.
So if are we happy with departmental office? And we put it in the agenda, like the meeting request as well. Can I also just add that, like, when the comment comes back, I think what we had works. This is actually very similar to what we had. It just clarifies roles and responsibilities and making sure that, like, you know, the feedback I heard was that sometimes there weren't enough regular meetings happening. So this actually puts in place that there will be, that the notes are shared, that everyone gets the feedback. It does not follow an informal meeting policy. This is a little bit different, but it's pretty much just revamped what we had, taking in that information that we got through the notified motion, saying that this is what we'd like to see. To me, this is what we've got now. So it is very similar to what we had. It's just tightening up who's responsible for what roles and how we also act and behave in there, just to manage those concerns about the conflict of interest and not getting into the operational discussions. For example, one of the comments was, well, what if we're sitting there talking about, oh, you know, we're just going to move this budget to that budget, and then someone in the meeting just assuming that that's actually been approved when it hasn't. Now, to me, that's not a really strong argument anyway, but we just make sure that we cover that off in the dot points above. No budget discussions or decisions, it's all just information sharing.
Yeah, I think most councillors should know the responsibilities and the protocols.
That's right.
Already, you know. Any other questions, councillor? Councillor Waddle?
I think the problem when it comes to conflicts of interest is when it's adding to the conversation of names of staff, businesses, residents with issues or whatever needs to be dealt with, and what strategy we want to go down, rather than just sticking to the overall strategy of which way we want to take the issue. I think if we, say Joe Bloggs bloody clears his land, and what do we want to do to attack it? Oh, Joe's a nice bloke, rather than, hey, someone's been clearing, or there's been a lot of clearing, and which way are we going? Or, get the gist.
Yep.
Yeah.
Councillor Demery?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ashburton. I've got a couple of things. Everyone in the room knows my opinion on the portfolio structure anyway. I was just going to refer to page 1 of 3, which is on page 90. Residents can identify which councillor to approach according to the strategic issue at hand in point 1.6. Councillors are to be seen reporting back to the community. That just highlights for me that it is kind of a political thing. I have concerns when a councillor has to talk about strategic stuff to a resident. When you talk strategic, you mean corporate plan stuff? Because that's so high that it's not really going to answer anything for the community member, which is sort of the issue that I see there.
It's the application of the strategic direction.
Yeah.
And so those are, like in our corporate plan, they are very high level overarching statements, but it would have to have more application to what the resident is talking about, because otherwise we'll be talking in circles and vague.
Yes.
And, the councillor's role is, as you'll know, you're there to present information from the community members. So having those discussions would be fine. It's when you're talking about more operational, we'll allocate this budget, that Bell Park will do this and that. That's not the conversations that should be had.
In policy statement of objectives 5.1.3, councillor individual skills, knowledge, background, specific area of interest are utilised. My concern there is conflict of interests. On the one hand, we're told if we've got any conflicts, we have to step out of the room and not have a say. On the other hand, we're asking, and I'm going to go straight to you, Councillor Polly, because yours is a very obvious one. So we've got Councillor Polly with the Polly's buses. Did I get that right? Coaches, buses, Polly's. And then he's on the roads.
Yep. So
And everything. Now, I personally think, of all of us, he's the one I absolutely want on that portfolio because he's got so much experience with the roads, no. Gutters, absolutely. But I just have concerns that it's a bit of a fine line. Now, it might be a wide fine line, but we're talking roads, they're pretty wide. So that's my concern. How do we get around that and make sure we're right?
Look at 5.1.8, must abide by council policies and council code of conduct. So if everyone is responsible for their own conflicts of interest and what they're talking about and what comes out of your mouth, pretty much, and if you consider that it's a conflict, then you say it's a conflict. Now, if there is any doubt, you can always ask, or it would be what a reasonable person would expect if it was under review.
Okay, so
it is really up to the person and how you operate yourself as a person and the values and sticking by that code of conduct and being able to manage that yourself.
Okay, so that brings me to my next point, which is you said something about, and I was trying to find it in the meetings, managing that sort of thing. And you said it as a more of a everyone kind of thing, where we're talking about, sorry, I wish I'd stuck my hand up straight away.
Six.
Yeah, probably. Employee responsibility, yeah. I mean, what we've found, we've got a couple of instances where we've said stuff, and although the staff have identified it might be a problem, instead of saying, just be careful there because of this, it's been let go to the point where they've gone away and put in a OIA complaint that's got to be investigated. Now, that's a huge expense to the organisation and a waste of staff members and councillors' time, but staff member in particular.
I agree.
Yeah.
And that is why we put this section in here about employee responsibility. And as I said, like, everyone's responsible for what comes out of their mouths. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. And I think staff also need to be trained on how to manage those things, and potentially there should be enough senior management in a meeting if there are concerns about that happening. But as when this policy is put in, we will also be training staff on how to manage. It's not conflict, it's just about having that ear for what should or shouldn't be discussed, and having the ability to be able to raise that there and then. And I think that has definitely come out of, you know, what's been happening previously, and that is one of the reasons why that employee's responsibility has been put in.
Lovely, thank you very much. Oh, I'll get it after.
Councillor.
I still have problems with this in many ways. 5.1.2, liaise with the community as required with regard to their assigned portfolio. I had a query 2 weeks ago about a town planning matter. Now, I would happily flick it to, it was a community meeting requested. I should have flicked it to Councillor Waldock, but I didn't. I handled it myself because fair dinkum, the planning portfolio council will be run off his feet. This is really causing a problem in a lot of areas where councillors get requests daily. Should we flick it to the portfolio councillor, or should we try and handle it ourselves? To me, that's a real conundrum. I like the fact that we can now get invited and go to the portfolio meetings. I would like car parks to be available at John Street Depot, please, because there's no parking there, and it means one has to park on the footpath, which means it may be an OIA complaint. That said, it is an advancement. I would very much prefer to be meeting in a place like this where we can get there. But realistically, I'm more than happy to flick everything about town planning to Councillor Waldock. Given the wording of this, I should. That's the problem. He will bog him down hopelessly, and he'll also then run the risk of getting caught up in OIA matters.
I think the councillor, your experience, Councillor Pregnant, you'd be able to answer any question, wouldn't you?
This says otherwise.
So the way I see it is, I agree, you should flick it. And in flicking it, it means that we have a look at how many people have we got per portfolio, because my understanding of the way it's structured is that the portfolio councillor is taking the responsibility of really understanding all of the issues that are around that matter. Now, in flicking it doesn't mean that everyone won't get a word or hear about the issues that might be discussed later on, but to me there has to be, like, that's why you take on that portfolio role, is so that you are the conduit to the community and you take like a championing role of that.
Aren't we going to take minutes of these portfolio meetings and circulate to all councillors?
There will be notes taken and circulated, yeah.
So won't that inform the other councils of what's
That's
actually
right.
happening, and they should be able to then comment on those?
That's right. That's how we're setting it up.
I tend to,
Should have to flick it to the portfolio councillor.
Well, to me, it is how the records come in, or how it's recorded, or how it's presented, and the information flow. Because if it's not coming through the councillor portfolio member or the councillor, to me some things could get missed. And I think it's our it's being respectful. I don't know if respectful is the word, but of the position that they should be aware of what's all coming in, and that's how you would do it, by getting receipt of all of the inquiries that come through.
I think most residents would think that their
Divisional.
councillor would have a broad knowledge of all council matters and expect an answer there and then. And maybe you could comment and say such and such, but if you want a defined answer, contact councillors who is a portfolio councillor.
I think, well, if that's how it's going to play out, like if that's what you think, how it works better, I still think that portfolio councillor should be definitely made aware as soon, like close to when that information comes in, that they get a say as well.
I think in,
sorry. I will just carry on because it just fits in with what we're talking about. It's just like the analogy when we said, if a councillor asks an employee a question, the employee can't give that answer without going through the directors. It's because they might have different information. They're in more conversations that are had to be able to give that councillor the correct answer. I think, to me, what you're describing to me is pretty along the same line.
I tend to interpret this a bit differently to what Councillor Fredman has. Now, 512 says to liaise with community and attend meetings. It doesn't say that the original councillor can't go to those meetings or whatever, especially if it's like in a rural area, like
right.
some of us have. Yet they like to see the divisional councillor there and probably prefer that to the portfolio councillor. It doesn't say the portfolio councillor has to go. Might want to liaise, that's fine, but there's nothing to say that the local councillor can't go.
We could actually add that to that 5.1.2, like to make it clearer, to liaise with, along with all councillors.
Because that's referring to what the portfolio councillor's got to do, not what the divisional councillor's got to do.
No.
Therein lies the dilemma, Mr Acting Chairman. I can flick all roads to Councillor Polly. The reality is that it does conflict with the role of councillors, and that concerns me greatly because I think for a start, for each councillor to be an expert in the area is a challenge, and I do pity the planning people for what they would have to learn. It's just that where do we apply this portfolio? And I'll call it a rule because that's the way it reads to me. Where do we apply it? It's most unclear to me. As I say, I got called to a meeting over a planning matter, and it's in my interest to go, but it's also, the way I read this, my responsibility to get the portfolio councillor there. Therein lies the dilemma, and I could burn everyone up here with all the requests I get.
Yeah.
And I pity some portfolio councillors because they will be in deep water trying to answer questions, because there's a wide range of knowledge required for each portfolio. And it's not making any sense to me. I may be the odd man out and I accept that.
So what would be a solution?
I don't, apart from sharing around the PR opportunities, I don't see any role for portfolios in this council. I think the mayor and the deputy mayor have specific roles, and I think that councillors representing ratepayers have specific roles. This is in the middle and it doesn't achieve anything to me, and it certainly, I think, can make life easy for councils or can make it hard, but I wouldn't want to be a portfolio councillor, even though I have skills in that area, for some of these areas.
The thing that worries me with this, if we proceed with this as it's written, how many more OIA complaints are we going to end up with? Because, councillor such and such commented on something which is not his portfolio, so is that going to happen?
There's nothing in here to say, I disagree with both you gentlemen, because there's nothing here to say, if I get lots of complaints about roads, as lots of particularly rural councillors do, I have no issue going to check out the road, putting a request in, whatever. I don't have to, there's nothing in here to say I've got to liaise with the portfolio councillor, nothing. There's nothing in here to say that Councillor Fredman had to liaise with me or Councillor Wardock about the planning issue, nothing. This is about what portfolio councillors are required to do. Now, it'd be nice to know about a meeting about planning or whatever, and so we can feed it back to staff or whatever, but this is about what portfolio councillors do, and it's not about what divisional councillors do.
Councillor.
Firstly, I'd like to thank Councillor Fredman for pitying me. And what I've found is people ring up about, town planning issues, and they want to know what I recommend they should do. That's not my job. I'm not a town planner. Never was, never will be.
Don't sell yourself short.
As an elected representative, it's about keeping this shut and these open. And it's all about listening to the people, not telling them, otherwise you're starting to dictate. I'm not the professional in these fields. I take their concerns that I've heard to the portfolio meeting. And that's all it is, quite simple.
But to me, you also know who to direct those inquiries to.
Yep.
Right?
There's
So
opposite Shannon Street.
Yes. Yep, there's a 1300 number and there's also an email.
Yep.
And I can't specifically tell them who to call because I don't know staff names.
That's right.
I don't even know their positions.
Yeah, that's right. So we still know where to send the inquiry to. So therefore, is it that you would have a lot more workload? What Councillor Fredman's saying? That's what I'm hearing by just sending those sort of inquiries through. Is that what you mean, Councillor Fredman?
I'll take the example, as the councillor just mentioned, that reporting back to the portfolio councillor. I see no value in that whatsoever. I want to report back to the director or the senior staff member.
And you still can.
They're the professionals. I don't want to report back to the portfolio councillor because I see no point in it.
We need to know the concern.
We need to know the concern. We refer it on to the staff or the department, or even the CEO. I don't understand where portfolio councillors assist in any way in solving problems or advancing any cause.
So the other way, like I'm just thinking now, is if those types of inquiries were directed back to, the council, and it goes to the directors, those issues can then be discussed with everyone at the meeting. They can be collated, and all of those issues then can come up to the councillor portfolio at the meeting. That can also occur.
So just to pick up on a theme that I'm hearing, and I just need to check. There's portfolios. I've worked with councils that have portfolios, there's that don't. Am I hearing that there is value in the portfolios from some elected members? I'm just checking because there was an indication there might be.
Yes.
I think at the moment we don't.
Okay, I just wanted to check. So we're moving down this path for a reason.
Yes.
You're staying on it. It's just,
Thank you. I've got a couple of points to make. Just firstly, just a real small one. Well, I think it's a big one, but a small one. On page 3 of 5, page 95, if you just want to follow along, 5.1.4, councillors will attend their scheduled portfolio meeting. Is there a legislative?
No,
No.
because council, this whole policy is not required by legislation.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to know because what we have to do is show up to the meeting.
Could be
the
put
ordinary.
as may,
Sorry?
input, like,
Should?
Well, usually, sometimes we're away, sick, whatever.
Can I have that clarified?
Councillors to attend, so that's the general review.
Yes, yeah. I just like to make the,
Sounds more like an order.
No, is that I was just like to clarify that because it's in legislation that we must meaningfully be involved with what we're required. So yes, legislatively meetings, yes, but we're supposed to go to these or workshops or briefings or the other stuff. We're supposed to make all effort to be meaningfully involved with that. That's legislation. Is that correct?
Councillor portfolios is not a legislative requirement. However, if it becomes a policy by the majority, then a councillor's role is to abide by as best as possible to the policies of the council.
Yeah. So I think
Does that make that clear?
Yes, no, it does. Thank you very much.
So
Yes.
you're saying should would be,
Should attend? Yeah, absolutely. But we've got 2 in each area at the moment, don't we? So one can go, one cannot go, and that still goes ahead and all the rest of it. So I just wanted that, but the main reason I put my hand up here is actually page 2 or 3 of the first council policy, page 91. And I just want to make a point with,
sorry, I'm just, which one?
page 91.
No, I've just got that.
Of the first policy.
The first one, yeah.
So the old policy.
The old policy, yeah.
Was that the old one, is it?
Yeah, that's the current policy.
Oh, right. Thank you.
And which section?
Now he knows the current policy, it's not worried.
Yeah, so I will still make my points though, okay, but I just won't refer them down to there. Thank you. I just think when we're talking about councillors referring stuff to the portfolio councillor, I don't know why I'm pointing at you. What we've got is another point of failure, potentially, for the information and getting back to the resident. We've got another way of slowing down the flow of information to the resident. So I have concerns about that. Also, I think when it comes to, and let's face it, residents aren't likely to come to Councillor Waldock about roads and ask for something that's in the corporate plan. So for me, it is automatically a operational staff issue. And I send those in via the portal. And, I put in, please give me the answer as well. And that all seems to work fairly good. I do understand one of the biggest benefits of this, to my mind, is trying to take work, and without it, it's kind of not worth it at all, trying to take work away from staff. The more inquiries that we can, get and reflect back and give an answer to, the less work staff have to do. So that, to me, is the biggest benefit of a portfolio councillor.
So on that shouldn't be your concern, because that's not your role either, is to manage the resourcing of councils, inquiries. No.
I don't understand.
Well, your role is in the strategic space, and the way our conversation went before, I thought that it's a good idea to send any of those inquiries through to the portal or through other ways.
Yep.
But if you're saying that you're trying to answer the questions to stop staff having to do that, I don't think that should be your.
If I have the answer and I can show where we voted something through or whatever.
Concern, and it's come through on documents and not confidential information, but information that, of course.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So that was my other point here, is that by the portfolio councillor trying to answer a question, there is more risk that the resident will get confidential information.
No.
I know you say no, but I can tell you now there is, because...
And again, back to your, how a councillor, under the code of conduct and under every other thing, is about how they manage the confidential information of council. Again, that's the responsibility of the councillor.
But also, as a councillor, I want to minimise the opportunities for that to happen. Because you can let something... I mean, even just recently with the standing orders, in my head, that was through. So I'm looking for the standing orders in our website, the latest one that we're fixing up, and it's not through. But in my head, we were
We
done.
all make mistakes.
Mr Lewis.
Yep, through Mr Chair. I agree with Councillor Stewart. I can't see how this policy is written that there's a need to refer issues back to the portfolio councillors. But what I would refer council back to is 5.1.6 about strategy and strategic direction. So I would think regional council or divisional councillors are getting issues that are recurring, then they would refer it to the relevant portfolio councillor so that they could address that with council officers at a higher level to say there's an ongoing issue throughout council. We need to start to focus on how we address those issues. So to me, it's not refer that item to Councillor Waldock for addressing. It's the normal process would run, but the themes and the issues of concern would be referred to the relevant portfolio councillor so that he can address those in the portfolio meetings.
And coming up soon, we are reviewing the executive request guidelines, and that also will have a table that will give examples of what sort of inquiries you receive and who they go to and how it gets to them. So that might clarify too that flow of information and inquiries.
Okay, so if I could, I just had one more point to make, which I think is valid about the passing on of information and so forth. A lot of the inquiries I get aren't from my division, aren't from my portfolios. And sometimes the reason for that is the resident doesn't want to contact a certain councillor. So I think we have to be aware of that when it comes to passing on information and, well, not passing on the question for that person to then contact the resident. So, you know, personalities come into our roles very much.
Therefore, I think that supports that whole going through the
Yes.
CRM portal and going through that. It's not a personality contest. Well, I guess it is.
Contest, not at this level here.
No? But I'm saying, like, then there's no, you know, it's just an inquiry has come in and it's gone to the portal, and you're following the guidelines of however we say information's to come in, so that the administrative arm can best manage it. That's their issue then.
Yes, that's great.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. I just hope that we don't end up with a policy that there's more rules and regulations for us to try and trip over. That's all of that. Yes, Bill?
I'll go last.
Just a quick one. In order to play the game correctly, if I get a query, I would like the right to send it straight to staff. Can I get an assurance that the responsibility would then be on staff if they have to liaise with the portfolio councillor? It's the responsibility of whoever's handling it
Yes.
to get onto the portfolio councillor. I don't want to make that decision because I don't see how it could value add, but if it could be written that it's staff responsibility to involve the portfolio councillor, not mine, then that makes it somewhat easier.
Yes, definitely.
Well, they create the agenda.
Yeah.
If you may. Fully agree with your earlier comments on I'm happy with the system that we've got. However, I do agree that probably does need a little bit of tightening up in some of the terminologies that we have so it is a little clearer for both us as councillors and staff. I'd probably highlighted a heap of things through here. The one was it's an information sharing, so I don't know about anyone else going to the portfolio meetings. I don't go for the agenda, I don't go for the note taking. I go for the information share that I'm getting so I can ask those questions of the manager or the director or whoever is presenting and the topics that they're presenting at the time. There is a big array of obviously projects or long-term strategies that we're doing in each of our portfolios. We'd like to see some sooner rather than later. It gives us an opportunity to have questions on why and when they're coming up and things like that, and also to delve down a little bit into those projects or strategic directions. It does touch on the operations a little, but not in a directive. It's more of an understanding to ensure that the strategic side's actually being hit. That's how I've done my portfolio stuff. And that's what I thought they were for about. So this whole note-taking, agendas and everything else and going out to, that's actually a meeting to me. That's a full meeting. And if we're going to go down that track, then maybe we seriously ditch portfolios, which was brought in to lessen our workload, and go to committees like some other councils have. Because if we want to have those full conversations and go through all of that, then that's probably a pathway to go down or to think about. So that's one of the ones that I had looked at, and I thought that's some additions to our previous policy has come in. This is all of that, all of those type of things, which everyone wants to have the information. Well, we're actually in the standing order supposed to give updates every 6 months. We don't do that. We tried, we stopped, and now we don't do that. I found it easy as a single portfolio holder when I had it at the start because I could independently go and do it. Now I have to, liaison with another portfolio holder to do that. That's probably my fault. Should do that a little better. To do those reports on how to do that. So maybe that should be kind of incorporated into this because it is part of our standing orders currently as well and how we do that. I see a lot of frustration that's come out of some of the directions in here that has been a flaw or let down with us in this boardroom of not communicating as councillors as well.
Councillman, the standing orders are developed, or the way that is worded is about committees, not as this is set up.
It does actually have in there every 6 months portfolio councillors will report back to council on strategic stuff. It's one of the last sections that's in there. Yeah.
But just remember too, the committees that they're talking about in some of those, it's not as a committee as the portfolio.
No, I think it's actually directly, I think it's portfolio. It does say portfolio. It's why the section in our agenda.
Yeah, but okay.
Yeah, no, it was something that brought up.
I'm talking about committees.
No, it's not committees. So committees is different.
That's
and
right.
If we want to look at that whole meeting and have all these set and have all these full-on discussions, well, maybe that's something the council really needs to look at as a shift. I'm happy with portfolios. I like it. It's a lesson workload. If you go to committees, there is a lot more meetings per week.
And that to me is the discussion we've already had.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to move forward now on this one.
So that's where I'm going. Well, it's just like, well, the whole 6.16, it's like ensure that the notes are being taken and distributed to all councils and things like that. That's a meeting to me. Well, I think some of the staff have jotted some stuff down, as in discussion feedback, but no full notes have come out of an agenda per se that I've had at real portfolio meetings really, so I'm not quite sure what we're going to be circulating, and that I see as a big impost on staff.
So through you, Mr Chair, there will be, now under this policy, there will be an agenda and there will be notes taken of the meeting.
Yeah, I'm not for that. I like the old system where we just get to have a catch-up chat. It's really informal. I'm happy to wipe all that back out. That's an inclusion. I'd like to have it wiped back out, personally.
I think notes are so they can send it to other councils.
Well, so it's the points of discussion, but how deep do you go into that then? Because a lot of it's verbal. So do we take notes for the whole entire hour-long meeting? That's a report, pretty much.
You just want headline, the topics and maybe 1 or 2 sentences on each topic. You wouldn't want any detail, and that's. I can see where you're coming from. I don't want staff being burdened by writing long notes, but on the other hand, I think it is appropriate that other councillors know at least what's being talked about, even if it's not in much detail.
So is that staff or a portfolio councillor should be doing that? You're doing a really excellent job of what you were doing.
Yeah, I did the first time with it. There was a lot of work done.
Yeah, exactly.
So it talks about that in the responsibilities of employee responsibility, I think, about taking notes.
Yeah.
So that's the staff officer. That's staff doing that.
The other one I have here is it's a regular portfolio meetings and schedules the minimum of 1 quarter, which I think is excellent because I had an issue before of they weren't calling any portfolio meetings. I was told by the CEO at the time that, oh, no, they're not necessarily whatsoever. So loving that part in there. The second part is all councillors are invited to these meetings. Portfolio is an intimate between the portfolio councillors. All of a sudden, if everyone wants to turn up because they're interested in a topic, you've got 8 people in a room trying to have a conversation. It's not going to be... Yeah, but that's the whole thing. It's you may not have all the understanding, the strategic and everything else. You just want to come for the conversation in the room.
That we should have.
We seem to manage it here, okay?
Well, we don't. So no, well, sometimes you don't have the proper conversations here because it does get dominated, or it gets fleshed out over a long period of time, and not everything comes out. So this is where I'm happy with the current system that we've got, where the portfolio councillors attend a portfolio meeting, and then what comes out of those portfolio meetings that I've found is like, oh, this needs a full discussion with council. So then that actually goes with full report, it goes for full discussion with council. Nothing gets decided. These are not statutory, they're not decision making. All those conversations that are really interesting points that people want to talk about does come to this room in a workshop.
You put your hand up first. I just want to say, and this is not a personal thing, but what you're saying there, and you've said that sort of thing before, that's actually the most worrying thing. What you're talking about is the most worrying thing to me about portfolio meetings, and concerning to me that you say it the way you say it, because it does seem to push towards that more having a say which leaves out everyone else. And we had an example of this sort of thing recently with the with Bonnick Street Management, is that, you know, it's got in here, you know, the portfolio managers thought it was all A-OK, and they're supposed to represent the general view of councillors, but they were more probably representing their own view and didn't know what the room thought, because we don't tend to have meetings just of councillors to discuss like areas of council and what the general feel is for councillors. So I don't know how portfolio councillors can know what the room thinks. It's more what they think.
Well, it's not. No, I'm sorry. Deputy Mayor, I will respond to that.
Yeah.
And if for that particular example, yes, it was mentioned, I looked at strategic timeframes, situation to do with that department, and I looked at all that, and we obviously have workshopped this, and it has been resolved with the result that I looked at from a whole strategic, from my point of view. It was something that was mentioned very small. It wasn't a whole big discussion. It's like, oh, it's coming up. I'm like, oh yeah, that probably makes sense. Okay, there's nothing we can do there. Come to council about it. Then it was brought up, oh, we need to workshop it. Yeah, workshopped, and then the same result was happening anyway. So it's...
would it have been the same?
It wasn't my opinion. I looked at... So you're saying my opinions are going in. No, they're not. My opinion should not be in that room. It's looking at strategic, or it's looking at situation. It's looking at what's presented by staff at the time. It's not my personal opinion.
Okay, so if I could respond to that. Sorry, no. This is actually really interesting and I think a worthwhile discussion. So your opinion was actually, you agreed with them. Would that be correct? You agreed with staff?
No, when you look at the situation, and it was a passing comment, it wasn't a full section of a portfolio meeting, it was just something that I knew was coming up, and then it didn't really, like, it was like, oh, okay, yes, that is coming up, okay. So it wasn't a full discussion. If that's what you're saying, it's like, oh, do we flesh it all out?
It is, yeah.
No.
So therefore, what I'm saying is that if it had been a portfolio meeting or with other councillors there, I know there are people in this room who would have dug further because they did have a differing opinion, and that could have been you know, given a little bit more room and a little bit more time to have discussions prior to when it came up to the actual ordinary meeting, or even to the workshop.
It wasn't that long beforehand. So you're just picking on that one example.
I'm not picking on it, I'm using it because it's the most recent.
Well, I could use another example when we had a couple of years ago that we threw out a whole entire local planning instrument that apparently was brought up with the officers at the time. I heard nothing about it. I was in the environmental portfolio, and then it just came to a meeting and off it went.
Right, can I
So
just
that's,
say-
I'm just saying examples. So I'm happy with the way it is. That's what I'd like to say here. I'm not comfortable with all councillors being in the room, and it says I must attend. If I'm not comfortable with all the discussion, why do I have to attend a meeting with all councillors at one time, where I think it may turn into a full discussion that could be well off target, where we're looking at strategic. I know we are from our corporate plans, our strategy, strategic plans that we are really lacking on at the moment. There's a lot happening in those spaces. I want to delve down. I want to have some really good conversations on that. And I want to segue to other councils that may not be well versed in that.
So
they can come back to this room.
In response to that,
Sorry, Councillor, I've just got back. I think what we need to accept is whatever system we adopt, it's a system. It's going to have imperfections. It's going to have areas that don't always work the best, and sometimes we have to pick the best of a bad group. And I guess we can bounce backwards and forwards about what system we feel is the most appropriate. This is more about feedback to staff today, and if it comes to council for an adoption, we can really dig down on the particular issues in relation to the policy. But I think just in the keep things moving.
I'd rather do that here though than an ordinary meeting.
I know, but I mean, you've got two councillors here that clearly are at different ends, and I don't think there's anything you can say that will win over Councillor Milne. No. I don't think there's anything Councillor Milne can say that will win you over. I think the important thing is that the staff have the feedback.
Yeah.
If you've got some other issues or some specific detail you want to raise, then it probably would be helpful if you could forward that in an email to staff. Okay. I just in the short time I've been here, I think both of you really believe in.
No, I actually think this is the most reasonable discussion we've ever had. But it's good because we are talking about different points of the same issue, and I think it's important.
Yeah.
No, well, look, I have to agree. It's about trust within the councillors around us, and that's, I think, the point that we're making here is do us as councillors, individual councillors in this boardroom, have trust in the other councillors? And that was the whole point that I was making is if you do have trust those other councillors that they are fulfilling their roles under the legislation and within what we're supposed to be doing, then all of us being in a portfolio meeting is not going to aid that. It's just going to aid the information sharing. Maybe we should get, as councillors, a lot better at that information sharing.
I think we need to, Ms Mary, we need to look at the reality of what's happened recently, because I think a couple of portfolios, they have invited all councillors. I don't know how many turned up, but it's also quite simply said the two portfolio councillors are in for the discussion, the others can go as observers. And given that I think no others turn up anyway, I gather, it says something because we're all busy, we've all got other things to do. And there's other ways for me to get involved anyway. So portfolio meetings are one additional way. I can still email any of the directors saying, can we talk about this issue? Or raise an issue with them, and they may take it to a portfolio meeting, they may just send me a back rude email, I don't know, but so it's just another way of talking. It's not, doesn't exclude other possibilities.
I don't think there's anything threatening about it. It's just like Dan and I haven't had any extras show up at ours. It must be a pretty boring portfolio, you know, and I don't think any extras have turned up at the others either. It's just the option is there and there's nothing threatening about that.
I guess when it comes back to council, if staff could have two options available, so councillors can make that decision on the day, that would be appreciated. Are there any other questions or statements, councillors?
Yes, I need coffee.
You need coffee, do you? Let's move on to the next item.
It's open.
I believe that's the last item on today's workshop.
Yeah, it's section 2.
Yeah,
we've got the briefing next, is that correct? Yes. Yes, so we'll adjourn for a coffee and then we'll come back and do the items that are on the briefing. Thank you.
Good.